Welcome back to Narrations, where movies are retold through feeling, flavor, and memory. Today's story is about two women separated by time but united by passion. One lives in 1950s Paris, learning to cook her way into history. The other, in early 2000s New York, finds purpose in a tiny apartment above a noisy street. One changes the world through a cookbook. The other changes herself through that very same book. This is Julie and Julia, 2009, a story about food, writing, and the art of finding meaning, one recipe at a time. It begins in Paris, 1949. Julia Child, tall, cheerful, and endlessly curious, steps off a train with her husband Paul. He's a diplomat, posted to France. She's a woman searching for what comes next. Paris wraps around them in color and taste, fresh bread, cafe chatter, the sizzle of butter in a pan. Julia doesn't just fall in love with the city, she falls in love with food itself. At home, she's restless. She's tried hat making. She's tried bridge. None of it fits. But every time she eats, she feels alive. So she decides to learn how to cook, really cook. She enrolls in Le Cordon Bleu, the most prestigious culinary school in Paris, becoming the only woman in a class full of skeptical men. She's older than them, taller than them, and infinitely more enthusiastic. She chops onions too slowly, spills sauce on her apron, and laughs through every mistake. But Julia Child is not the kind of person who gives up. She learns, she practices, she masters. Day after day, she arrives early, stays late, and slowly earns the respect of her instructors. Cooking becomes her language, her rhythm, her joy. Her husband Paul supports her completely. He watches her with quiet admiration, happy to see her come alive in a kitchen filled with copper pots and butter. Together, they explore France, tasting their way through markets and bakeries, Julia asking endless questions in her broken but cheerful French. She's not just learning recipes, she's discovering a way to share happiness. And then, almost half a century later, another story begins, one much smaller, quieter, but just as important. It's 2002 in Queens, New York. Julie Powell is about to turn 30. Her apartment is cramped, her job is thankless, and the noise of the city never seems to stop. Her friends are busy, her writing dreams feel like dust, and she's starting to believe she'll never do anything meaningful. Every night she comes home exhausted. Her husband, Eric, kind and funny, listens as she vents about work. And one night she says something simple but life-changing. "You know what I love? Cooking." She loves it because it's tangible. It starts with nothing, eggs, butter, flour, and turns into something beautiful. It gives her control when life feels out of it. So she comes up with a plan. She'll cook every single recipe from Julia Child's Mastering the Art of French Cooking, all 524 of them, in 1 year. And she'll blog about it. One post every night, no matter how tired she is. It sounds crazy. It is crazy. But Eric smiles and tells her to do it anyway. Julie starts small, bœuf bourguignon, roast chicken, omelets. Her kitchen is tiny, her knives are dull, and her sink clogs constantly. But something magical begins to happen. Each meal connects her a little more to Julia. Each recipe feels like a conversation across time. As the days turn into weeks, Julie starts to find rhythm in the chaos. She blogs honestly, about her triumphs, her failures, and her meltdowns. Readers find her. Comments pour in. Suddenly, people across the world are following this ordinary woman as she tackles extraordinary food. Meanwhile, in Paris, Julia Child's story continues. She's now teaching cooking classes with two French friends, Simone and Louisette. The women dream of writing a cookbook that brings French cuisine to American homes. Publishers reject them over and over. Too complicated, too long, too foreign. Julia refuses to stop. She rewrites every recipe until it's perfect, testing them again and again in her tiny Paris kitchen. Her determination becomes a quiet revolution, making something once seen as elite into something anyone could love. Both women, Julia and Julie, are driven by the same hunger, the need to create, to be seen, to matter. Julia fights against the expectations of her time. Julie fights against the emptiness of hers. Both find salvation in butter. Julie burns her first attempt at hollandaise sauce and cries into the pan. Julia once dropped an omelet on the stove, smiled, and flipped it back in. The world calls it a mistake. They both call it experience. As Julie's blog grows, so does her confidence. Strangers write to her saying she's inspired them to cook again, to take chances, to chase something they love. For the first time in years, she feels like she's part of something bigger. Her apartment smells of onions and wine every night. Her husband Eric jokes that their ceiling drips butter. But he's proud. Back in the 1950s, Julia and Paul's life changes too. Paul's government career is shaken by political suspicion, and they're forced to move back to America. Julia misses Paris, but she carries it with her, in every meal, every laugh, every lesson. When her cookbook finally gets published, years later, she becomes an overnight success. Her charm, her warmth, her humor, it all jumps off the page. Soon, she's on television, showing Americans how to cook like the French, without fear. "If you're alone in the kitchen," she says, "who's to know?" Julie, watching decades later, feels that same warmth through the screen. She sees not just a chef, but a mentor. Julia's laughter fills her small kitchen in Queens like sunlight through old curtains. When Julie fails, she imagines Julia cheering her on. When she succeeds, she imagines her smiling with approval. But the truth is, Julia and Julie are more alike than either of them realize. Both wrestle with self-doubt. Both seek meaning. Both are women trying to build something lasting out of small, ordinary moments. Julie doesn't know Julia's opinion yet. For her, the project is nearing its end. Only a few recipes remain. Her kitchen looks like a battlefield, sauce-stained cookbooks, cracked mixing bowls, and a mountain of dishes in the sink. But there's pride in the mess. It's proof of her journey. She finishes the last dish late one night, alone. The clock ticks past midnight. The air smells of butter and wine and exhaustion. She takes a bite, closes her eyes, and lets the flavor linger. It's done. She's done. A year of her life, of frustration, joy, growth, all condensed into one final taste. The next morning, Eric returns. They look at each other for a long moment before either speaks. There's no need for apology. They both learned something about love, that it's not about perfect moments, but about showing up even when everything feels impossible. They embrace, quietly, and everything softens. In the weeks that follow, Julie's story spreads. Her blog gains national attention. Reporters call. Publishers reach out. People want to hear about the woman who cooked her way to happiness. She's invited to meet editors, to sign a book deal. The girl who once thought she'd never make anything of herself has finally found her voice, through food, through persistence, through Julia. Eventually, Julie learns that Julia didn't quite approve of her project. At first, the news stings. She feels rejected by the woman she's spent a year honoring. But then, as she stands in her tiny kitchen staring at the cookbook that started it all, she smiles. She realizes Julia doesn't have to approve. What matters is that she inspired her. Julia gave her courage when she had none. And courage, like a good recipe, doesn't belong to one person, it belongs to everyone who dares to try. She writes her final blog post with a full heart. "Julia Child changed my life," she says. "She taught me that when you fall in the kitchen, you pick yourself up. When you burn the sauce, you start again. And when you doubt yourself, you add more butter." Back in time, Julia stands in her kitchen, putting away utensils after another long day of cooking. Paul looks at her, eyes filled with love, and says, "You know you've changed the world, right?" Julia laughs softly. "Well," she says, "I only wanted to make dinner." Years later, Julie and Eric visit the Smithsonian Museum in Washington, D.C. In one of the exhibits stands Julia Child's real kitchen, preserved exactly as it was, down to the pots, the pans, and the pegboard walls. Julie walks in slowly, her eyes wide, her voice quiet. This isn't just a room. It's a legacy. She stands where Julia once stood, touches the counter, and feels the connection that no disapproval could ever break. She whispers, almost to herself, "Thank you?" The story ends not with applause or fame, but with understanding. Two women, decades apart, bound by the same truth, that passion, no matter how small it seems, has the power to change your life. Julia found hers in the art of French cooking. Julie found hers by following Julia. Both discovered that meaning doesn't come from perfection, but from effort, from care, from love, from showing up even when no one is watching. In the final moments, we see Julia and Paul in old Paris photos, laughing, cooking, dancing in their kitchen. Then Julie and Eric at home in Queens, sitting down to dinner, smiling at each other across the table. Two kitchens, two hearts, one shared spirit. Life isn't always about doing great things. Sometimes it's about doing small things with great heart. About feeding someone, even yourself, with care. Julia once said, "Find something you're passionate about and keep tremendously interested in it." And that's what both of them did. The screen fades to soft music, warm and golden, like sunlight through the window of a Sunday kitchen. And that was Julie and Julia, a story about food, love, and finding purpose, told through the beautiful mess of real life. If you enjoyed this narration, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Narrations, where stories are savored, one film at a time. Because sometimes, the best recipes aren't just written, they're lived.